Okay, so we're diving into something that, on the surface might seem a little, well, dry. But I promise it's way more interesting than it sounds. Making sense of cloud costs. You ever get that feeling when, you get your credit card bill after a trip and you're like,
Oh,
whoa,
yeah.
what did I even buy with all this?
Mystery charges.
Totally. Except instead of like a few too many souvenirs, we're talking about potentially millions of dollars in cloud spending that companies can't always account for.
Right.
And this is where I hear something called FinOps kind of swoops in to save the day.
Yeah, it's like bringing in a financial detective.
Yeah.
But, instead of a trench coat, they've got cloud dashboards and spreadsheets.
Okay, I'm already intrigued. So it's not just about cutting costs, but
Yeah.
it's actually understanding where the money's going.
100%.
Yeah.
You got it.
And I'm also hearing that there's a key part of this called allocation. What is that all about?
Allocation.
Yeah.
So imagine you and your team. You order a giant pizza.
Yeah.
Allocation is like figure out who pays for which slice
Okay.
and making sure everyone agrees on how to split the bill
Yeah.
before they dig in.
Right.
Yeah, it's knowing exactly who is using which cloud resources and how much it's all costing.
So no more arguing over who got the extra pepperoni. But on a serious note, how does this whole FinOps thing actually work in the real world? Because it does sound a bit idealistic.
Well,
Like, those perfectly organized kitchen drawers that you see in magazines, they're never real life.
that's where the crawl, walk, run model comes in.
Okay.
It kind of recognizes that, different companies are at different levels,
Yeah.
of managing their cloud spending.
Right.
So some are just starting out. Those are all crawlers.
Okay.
Like imagine using spreadsheets to track millions in cloud costs.
Spreadsheets. Really?
I
That
was-
sounds terrifying.
It can be. But even at this early stage,
Right.
the goal is for these crawlers to directly allocate at least 50% of their cloud costs.
Okay.
It's about just getting a handle on the basics.
Okay. Like those first few steps a baby takes,
Yeah.
a little wobbly. But it's progress. So what happens once a company has mastered the crawl? How do they start walking towards better cloud cost management?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
This walking phase is where they start to ditch those spreadsheets
Okay.
for, more sophisticated tools.
Okay.
They start to kind of embrace the power of tagging.
Tagging. Okay.
Essentially just labeling their cloud resources.
I love a good label maker. So how does labeling things in the cloud help?
It's like, think about organizing your kitchen.
Okay.
Instead of a jumbled drawer of utensils, imagine every spatula and whisk was neatly labeled.
Oh.
You'd know exactly what you have, where it belongs, who's been using the garlic press to make guacamole again.
Wait, you don't use the garlic press for guacamole. Never mind. Okay.
We can get into that later.
I get the point.
Yeah.
Okay, so labels equal clarity.
Yes.
So in the cloud world, these tags help companies see exactly which team or project is using each resource.
Exactly.
And then that makes it easier to track the spending.
100%.
Yeah.
And at this walking stage, they're aiming to allocate around 75%
Okay.
of their cloud costs directly. They're also starting to tackle the kind of tricky issue of shared resources.
Uh-huh.
Like figuring out how to divide the cost of that virtual server that multiple teams might rely on.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for some serious interdepartmental squabbles. But we'll save that juicy drama for later. What about those companies who've moved beyond those baby steps and are ready to run? What does that look like?
These are the ones that have really embraced FinOps.
Yeah.
They're not just tracking costs, but they're using the data to make smarter business decisions.
Right.
And they've gone all in on automation. Think like self-driving cars, but for cloud costs.
Oh, wow.
And they're aiming to allocate almost all their spending, like 80 to 100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. They've gone from tracking expenses to strategic decision making,
Yeah.
all thanks to FinOps. But I think some people listening might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually get everyone on board?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Because like any sort of major shift, FinOps really requires a team effort.
Okay.
It's like, think of it like putting on a play.
Right.
You've got actors, writers, stagehands, and of course you've got the director calling the shots.
Love this. Okay.
Everybody has a role to play.
So who are the main players in this FinOps production that we're putting on?
So first up, you've got your FinOps practitioners.
Okay.
They're kind of like the stage managers, right?
Right.
Making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes.
Right.
They're responsible for, implementing the FinOps framework,
Mhm.
tracking those cloud costs,
Right.
making sure everyone is on budget.
Sounds like a big job.
It is.
Who else is on the team?
So then you've got your product teams.
Okay.
Those are your writers.
Okay.
Dreaming up all the amazing new features and products. But just like, a playwright needs to consider like the limitations of the stage.
Right.
Product teams need to be very mindful of cloud costs.
Yeah.
When they're designing their masterpieces.
That makes sense. You don't want to write a play that needs a cast of thousands when you can only afford a handful of actors.
Exactly.
So who is bringing these product visions to life in our little FinOps theater here?
That's where the engineers come in.
Right.
They're the ones building the actual sets,
Yeah.
making sure the lights work.
Right.
They're responsible for actually implementing the cost-effective solutions
Okay.
and optimizing the cloud infrastructure.
So it's all about making that set as impressive as possible, but without, breaking the bank.
Exactly.
Okay, who else is kind of like behind the scenes here, making sure this whole production doesn't become a financial disaster?
Right. Well, we can't forget about finance.
Right.
They're the producers,
Okay.
keeping a close eye on the budget,
Right.
making sure we're not overspending and reporting on the, financial health
Oh,
of the production.
They're the ones that make sure that we can pay the actors at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Perfect. And then who would be the director in all of this?
There would be leadership.
Okay.
They're setting the overall vision,
Right.
the strategy for the organization.
Okay.
They need to be fully on board with FinOps
Yeah.
and champion its adoption across all the teams.
So it's about having a director who understands that, a well-managed budget is not just about saving money, but it's about investing wisely
100%.
and maximizing the impact of every dollar spent.
It's about aligning the cloud spending with the business goals and making sure everyone understands their role
Right.
in achieving those goals.
This whole theater analogy has been incredibly helpful.
Good.
It really kind of brings to life how collaborative this all is.
It is.
But let's maybe shift gears just slightly and talk about the why of all this. For anyone who's listening who's maybe still on the fence, what are the actual benefits of getting serious about allocation and FinOps and all that?
So one of the biggest benefits right off the bat is saying goodbye to those budget surprise heart attacks.
Right.
When you have a really clear understanding of your cloud costs,
Right.
you can anticipate those expenses.
Yes.
And you can plan accordingly.
No more opening that monthly bill with fear.
Exactly.
I like that a lot. Any other kind of perks to all of this?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Another major benefit is increased accountability.
Okay.
When teams know they're being held responsible
Right.
for their cloud usage,
Yeah.
they're way more likely to be mindful of costs
Right.
and look for ways to optimize.
It's like there's a built-in incentive almost to be more efficient
Exactly.
with how you're using.
100%.
Okay.
And this focus on accountability actually can lead to more innovation.
Interesting.
When teams are empowered to make these smarter decisions about their cloud usage,
Right.
they can come up with creative, cost-effective solutions that end up benefiting everyone.
It's almost like you're turning cost optimization into a team sport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Where everyone's working together to win.
Yeah, it's a win-win.
I like that.
And,
yeah.
this culture of collaboration and innovation
Right.
leads to better decision-making across the board.
Right.
When you have the right data,
Right.
you can make more informed decisions
Yeah.
about product development,
Yeah.
resource allocation,
Right.
even strategic investments.
So it sounds like it's not even just about saving money, which obviously we like.
Okay.
But it's about using those financial insights to make better decisions overall,
Yeah, you got it.
which I think is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like FinOps is really kind of transforming how organizations are thinking about this
It is
and how they're managing their cloud spend.
100%.
But let's get a little bit more in the weeds, a little practical here.
Okay.
What are some things that companies can actually do
Yeah.
to implement this and to get a handle on costs?
So the first step is defining a clear allocation strategy.
Okay.
So that involves determining how you're going to map those cloud costs
Right.
back to the teams or the departments that are responsible.
Right.
Think of it as like figuring out who pays for what toppings
Yes.
on that giant pizza.
No sneak in extra cheese anymore.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's about creating that transparency and accountability from the beginning.
Right.
It requires a good understanding of your organizational structure,
Okay.
identifying your cost centers,
Right.
and establishing really clear lines of ownership.
So everyone knows who's responsible for their slice of the cloud, so to speak.
Exactly.
I like it.
And to make this whole process way easier,
Yeah.
tagging and metadata are your best friend.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Back to the labels.
Back to the labels.
Yeah. So instead of just seeing cloud storage,
Yeah.
we can be like, oh, this is for Project X marketing team images or
Right.
whatever.
No, 100%. The more detailed you're tagging and the more consistent you are,
Right.
the more kind of granular and insightful your cost allocation will be.
Gotcha.
It's like having a well-organized spice rack.
Okay.
You can instantly find the smoked paprika
Yeah.
instead of just digging through a whole jumble.
Organization is key, as always. I do feel like this whole tagging thing, though, could get pretty complicated.
Yeah.
Especially with larger companies,
Totally.
When you've got tons of people, tons of products.
Yeah. It can be a challenge. That's why a lot of organizations are turning to automation.
Okay.
There's all sorts of tools out there that can help streamline the tagging process.
Right.
And ensure like consistency and accuracy, even at a really large scale.
So you're not like, manually tagging every little thing.
You don't want to be doing that.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I do have to imagine, though, that even with like the best tagging system, sometimes you run into those things where it's like, well, multiple teams are using this one thing.
Right.
How do we divide that cost fairly?
Shared costs. Those are always the trickiest.
Yeah.
But one common approach is to divide the cost proportionally based on usage.
Right.
So if Team A is using 70% of this thing and Team B is using 30%,
yeah,
then that's how you would split it.
The more you use, the more you pay.
Makes sense, right?
Right. Exactly. Are there any other ways to think about that? Or is that kind of like the gold standard?
There's other ways for sure. Some organizations prefer like fixed allocations.
Okay.
Especially if the usage is really hard to track.
Right.
Or if they want to kind of encourage everyone to share a resource.
All right.
It's like having like a shared snack fund at the office.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone chips in a certain amount every month.
I like that.
Regardless of whether they had, 5 bags of chips or 0.
Right. Exactly.
But the key here is transparency, really.
Yeah.
However you decide to approach it,
Right.
everyone's got to be on the same page.
Right.
Everyone needs to understand
Yeah.
how these costs are allocated and why.
And that, I'm sure, just reduces so many headaches down the line.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We've gone from staring in confusion at a credit card bill to talking about tagging and, strategic decision making. It's really cool.
So much to unpack.
It really is. And so for everyone listening, we hope that this has inspired you to kind of think about how your organization is doing this.
Yeah, how are you managing this?
Yeah. Are you crawling, walking, or running on your FinOps journey?
Exactly. And maybe even think about your own personal spending habits, too.
Oh,
right?
and that's a good point.
Like, do you track your expenses?
Yeah.
Do you look for ways to save money?
It's the same.
Very applicable.
It's applicable across the board,
100%.
whether you're dealing with your own bank account or a multi-million-dollar cloud budget.
It's all about awareness.
Yeah.
It's about making informed decisions and being accountable for your choices.
Love it. Well, on that note, until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.